What's up, guys? I'm Scott Dichotomy, and that's a really cool tree. And that's dab smoke. It's not like quite as haunted as it looks. It's a really cool tree, though. It's been the star of my streams for like the whole last month, basically. I love coming to this spot. I love this hike. Hello, sir. And I love that there's usually like no one else in here. So today, the topic of discussion on hiking with Scott Dichotomy is basically my whole life path as a musician and my whole life plan. Because I basically had it all figured out in my early 20s. And what I had figured out is that I just want to tour and play shows and pursue music obsessively for a good amount of time, like half the year, maybe a quarter of the year, maybe 3/4 of the year. But I need to balance it out with living in beautiful places like this, somewhere that I can go and just have solitude in nature. Actually, this tree I'm going over to right now, I haven't been over to this tree. It's almost as cool as that tree that we were just at. But you have to trek through the woods a little bit more to get over to this one, which is basically why I haven't gone over here. But oh boy, look at a big huge chunk of it fell off apparently. Oh. So yeah, I figured out in my early 20s, like, I just want to tour constantly. I just want to practically live on the road. And then in kind of like my mid-20s, I figured out that, like, I am definitely comfortable and can thrive. Whoa! That spider web was so fucking thick. Like, it felt like I just tugged on a piece of string, so I'm a little paranoid right now, to be perfectly honest. There's like a tarantula crawling on my shoulder, let me know. Oh my god! That was like... It felt like a piece of thread. Like, so, around like 12 years old, I started playing music, and it took me a year or so to really get into it, because when I first started playing music, it was a time in my life when I was going through a big shift, and I had just moved from the city to the suburbs. And I went from playing like 3 or 4 different sports to like not playing any sports. Didn't really have as good of a social situation in the new place I was living. I didn't really like the kids. They didn't really seem to like me all that much. Had a bunch of spare time, started getting into lots of trouble. My parents were like, you need some kind of extracurricular activity to keep your crazy energy in check, basically. So I have a lot of natural energy that if it's directed somewhere, it's good. Hence all these crazy amounts of projects I have and all the stuff that I'm doing. But when it's not directed somewhere, especially when I was younger, it just turns destructive, like most people or animals or anything, I guess. A lot of energy can be a good thing, but it's got to be directed somewhere. Ooh, that's pretty. And so my parents were like, you got to pick some kind of extracurricular activity. They forced me to pick something, because I was just basically hanging out, starting to get in trouble and stuff. And they let me choose the activity. So they said I had to pick something, but they let me choose what the activity was, and there wasn't really anything I was interested in doing. I was like 12, so I was starting to turn into a teenager, and you know, all the hormones and whatnot. And I was extra sassy. And my dad had just suggested that I try drum lessons because he played drums briefly as a kid. And my exact response was, I guess, if you're gonna make me do something, I guess drums aren't so bad. And so when I first started playing, it was just basically like, it's just something that I was supposed to do, basically, that was maybe more fun than like violin lessons or something, but for me at least. Today, I would love violin lessons. I would be ecstatic to play violin today. But I think that's because I started playing drums first. Like if my parents... Is it a woodpecker? Oh, this is a gorgeous spot. If my parents had just forced me to play like a more conventional instrument in school, like a lot of people do, like the clarinet when you're a kid, like thankfully I never had to do that for some reason. Now that I think about it, I played 3 or 4 different sports. I was wicked into art. I took like art classes. I was always drawing and designing all kinds of stuff. So I guess I had plenty going on that my parents didn't feel the need to throw music on top of it. But yeah, if I had been forced to take like piano lessons or like classical anything, I probably would have hated music and never gotten into it. But because I was able to do drums first, and I'm sure a big part of it was also the fact that I had a really cool drum teacher. He was like, he's kind of the perfect, now that I think about it, reflecting back on it, he was a great teacher and a great guy, but like probably kind of perfect, especially for like a young kid or like a teen or something, because he was just like a cool rock star kind of guy. Like maybe not actual rock star, but he definitely made a name for himself. I remember at one point something that stood out to me big time. This was after I'd been taking, I think, lessons from him for like a couple years or something. He was like, oh, you're gonna have a substitute drum teacher next week. And I was just like, oh, what the like, especially back then, I was super introverted. I'm like an extroverted introvert now, so I can have an extroverted side, but I was wicked shy back then. So the idea of having to talk to someone else basically was like mortifying to me. But the reason that I had a substitute, he was like, oh, I'm going to be on tour in Holland with, I think it was Blood for Blood. Yeah, Blood for Blood. I was just like, what? And so that's probably part of what really, not probably, like that guy is probably specifically responsible for the way I ended up, because like he taught me everything. He gave me like life lessons, he gave me music business lessons. He's the one that really pushed like, get your own website, get, you know, scottwhatever.com. And then seeing him not be there for drum lessons for a few weeks or whatever because he was on tour doing the thing, pursuing the dream, it's just like, wow, that's like that guy that teaches me and is telling me everything he knows, and also was telling me like, you know, also like, since you've been taking lessons from me all these years, like could be a networking thing, like, oh, if I'm not available for something but I know this guy is, etc. And so within like a year or so, I was wicked into it. I got wicked passionate into music, and I started teaching myself web design so I could have the website for the bands. And it took a few years, like, of trying to find the right people, trying to get my skill level up, trying to get the right band together. And then around the time I was maybe like 18 or so, I switched over to guitar and vocals and started doing basically what is now Scott Dichotomy. Actually, a lot of my Scott Dichotomy songs were originally songs from this project that I'm talking about. And we started playing shows a little bit. It was like the same idea as everything I do. I wrote and recorded basically everything myself. At the time, I had other people in the band that were contributing in writing, but it was still me like writing all the whole structure of the songs, the guitar, the vocals, the words, and everything. And it took a few years, I think it was maybe like a year or so of that, and then just Voice of the Dead happened, which Voice of the Dead was like a lot more solidified, distinct vision. It was like more of a tunnel vision approach. So then that's when I started really playing shows, and like I had a whole brand, the whole horror thing. I was just like, oh, I know horror. This is easy. I can just put horror into my music and everything that I do. And it didn't take very long for me to just know that that's what I wanted to do with my life. So within like a year or so of getting Voices of the Dead up and running, MySpace was a thing, and I just saw that as a directory to search for fans, venues, promoters, and bands by location and genre. So I just started booking shows and tours that way. We started off like doing lots and lots of local shows in like 2007, and then I ramped that up to doing like regional shows like New England and New York, and then we started doing the whole New York, New England thing, and then maybe we threw like a West or a Virginia date in there. And then we got to the point where we were like doing the eastern like half or third of the US, and then we played Toronto, and we were just gearing up, just building, and it's around 2008 at this point, and I just knew, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life, dude. Just like traveling around the country, just seeing a different place every day, playing to different people every night, and presenting all of the music that we worked so hard on, the stage makeup, that all the different stuff that I was doing. And I just knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life, and I was just passionate about it. And ever since, it's been my whole focus, basically. And then I realized that we needed some sort of stability too. Like, we're starting to get to a point where like touring was going pretty well, but like we needed like our own place to live and record and do stuff. We're in our early 20s, still living with our parents and stuff, and so we're trying to get the whole normal job thing going, and like the relationship I had at the time was not going well at all, and it took me a while, but I just knew that like the relationship involved the drummer in the band, and I knew that we had a bunch of momentum going with the band. And then I knew that because we'd been focusing on recording for like a year or so, we had stopped touring at this point and stopped socializing. I'd cut a lot of pretty much everyone else out of my life because I just had all toxic people in my life at that point, and I'd rather have no friends than toxic friends. And I just figured I'd focus on music like crazy for a few years, get the whole touring thing fully up and running, get that cycle going, and then I could tour once or twice a year. I could visit everyone all around the country, all around the world, once or twice a year. And that's how I'm most comfortable socializing. I love seeing everyone at shows, maybe staying with you for like a few days after the show or something, catch up, and then I'm on my way. Lord knows I'm a rambling man. And so then I had to separate and break that relationship off, and I knew that was going to be like, it was going to be a whole process trying to rebuild back, because I had to get a new drummer. I had no social life at this point, and like the band had kind of gone dormant because like we'd been focused on recording for a year or two, and that didn't go well or anything. So at this point I just focused on just getting myself set up. Basically, I was working for like a few years at just crappy Subway sandwich shop and convenience store, and just saved like every penny that I had, and I kind of went into hiding a little bit. I focused on improving myself mentally, spiritually, physically, financially. I ended up the happiest, healthiest, strongest, most wealthy version of myself probably to this day. And I had a job. I was working with the same company for a few years at this point. I had like a perfect credit score. I had like 11 grand saved up, and I just realized that I needed somewhere to balance all that crazy touring and shows energy. So if I have a place like this, basically, that I can balance all that with, I'm good to go. Like, I'm an extrovert and introvert, so I'm perfectly happy being the center of attention, life of the party, playing shows, especially if I can balance it out and like have time in places like this. So I basically was just working really hard, trying to save money to buy a small piece of land to go off the grid, because I knew I love living like this, and I can just live off of solar panels. And this is before I'd done all that. So but I just knew that was the way for me. It's like, I can just get an inexpensive piece of land, a few grand up north out in the middle of nowhere. I don't need internet or electricity or anything like that. I didn't need it at the time. especially because with solar panels and the wood stove, and I can just grow my food and weed and everything. So I focused on trying to find some land, and I had all this money saved up. Voice of the Dead's album was just about done, and I had a couple of land deals that I was about to sign the papers, and just people just made it difficult. Like, first one, after going back and forth for a year or two with realtors and stuff and looking at a bunch of pieces of land and property, I got pre-approved for mortgages and stuff. Like, I was just ready to go. I was like 25-ish at this point. This is maybe 10, 11, 12 years ago now. And then I found one piece of land. It was like dream location. It was like 12 acres way up in northern Vermont, super remote. The land was like, half of it looked like this, and then a part of it opened up, and it was just this big open field with this gorgeous mountain view. It was just picturesque and perfect. It was just mind-blowing. I was just like, oh my god, this is like a dream come true. I worked so hard for so many years on music and on working normal jobs, kept my credit score good, and now I'm good to go, and I get to just buy this and live. It is amazing. And then we hit a roadblock, because the only problem with this piece of land was that because it was so remote and off the grid, it was about like 100 yards from the gravel road, so it wasn't even like a solid road to begin with, but it's basically just woods, and I would need to get a 100-yard road extension done. I had no idea how much that would cost. I figured maybe a few $100,000 or something like that. And the realtor was like, you know, no one's even considered this land once I hear this. Maybe if you go get the estimate, he'll see that you took the initiative, and maybe you can work something out. I was like, yeah, hell yeah. So I basically had enough money to, like, for the down payment to cover the closing costs, and then to maybe have a tiny bit left over to start rebuilding my savings. And so I went and got the estimate. How much would it cost to extend the road by 100 yards? $10,000. It's like, what the hell? Are you serious? 100 yards, $10,000? That's insanity, dude. And so then I went back to the owner, and I was like, listen, they said it's going to cost $10,000 to extend the road. I don't have $10,000 to give you after I give you the $5,000 or $10,000. I think it was like a $10,000 down payment. I forget what we were working out. And then all the closing costs and the realtor fees and lawyer fees and all that. I was like, I don't have the money to cover all that. But I'm about to get a mortgage for $50,000 to give you the $50,000, talking to the owner. Like, how about I give you the $50,000 from the bank, from my mortgage, and then you just take 10 of that and just you get the road done, since you'll have $50,000 and I will have no money left over. And then I could have my dream property, and you could have $40,000 in your pocket for a piece of land that had been for sale for years that no one else seemed to want to buy. So he refused, and I was just like, what the are you kidding? So then I got another deal set up. It's 5 acres for like $25,000, so not quite as nice of a piece of land, not anywhere near as big, but less expensive, and still would be great. And so I got that deal all set up. Literally was like, deal, let's do this. Let's sign, let's get the papers written up for this deal. And then last minute, the realtor via the owner, or the owner via the realtor, whatever, I don't know. The two of them just like, oh, well, we want you to just like not tell the bank about the down payment. Just leave that out of the mortgage, so you can just give us the down payment in cash. And I was just like, really? Like, the audacity to even ask that. That's not legal. And they're like, oh, well, you know, you'd only get in trouble if the three of us told anyone. She's like, what the fuck, dude? That's not the point. I can't believe you even asked me that. I think this is kind of the treatment I get for like who I am, the way I look. Especially at the time I was 25, I probably looked like I was 13. And they're just like, oh yeah, the cool dreadlock guy will give us cash. And it's just like, no, dude, like, I'm trying to go off the grid so I can just live free and happy, not being worried that the feds are gonna come get me at any given moment. So then that fell through. And then Voice of the Dead's album was like 99% done. I had the 11 grand just sitting in my pocket. And then just got kicked out of the place I was staying at. Apparently, it wasn't really communicated to me that my lifestyle, understandably so, of being like a metal vocalist and touring and dating a stripper at the time. And I can understand how an average person wouldn't really mesh well, but instead of there being a discussion, there's just this blowout and a kicking out. So, but it wasn't the, I mean, it was a pretty terrible, traumatic thing in a lot of different ways. I don't really want to go down that road, but I had a bunch of money saved up and I was dating. I know I don't want to talk about this on this channel, but I was dating a stripper, so she was going to dance and cover our bills until we found a piece of land, basically, because I found basically backup pieces of land up here. There's a whole bunch of pieces of land that were like $5,000 per like acre, essentially. I was like, oh, perfect. If an acre, I don't even care what it looks like. An acre for 5 grand sold, give it to me. But then it turns out they're all in housing associations. And so I wouldn't be able to live in the bus, I wouldn't be able to live off the grid, I wouldn't be able to do anything. If I wanted to change the color of the house, I'd have to get it approved, and if I didn't, I'd get fined. It's just like, I don't want to live like that. And then, so I ended up homeless, and then I ended up, all my money ended up getting drained for all kinds of different reasons. And yeah, that was almost 10 years ago now, and it's just been like, essentially 10 years of trying to rebuild and get back to that, essentially. So, we encountered a human on the trail, and it was right as I was towards the end of the trail. I was gonna just like walk back and forth for a minute, but then they were there, and I was like, get me away from them. That's my introverted side. So, I guess you'll get a little taste of the old days of driving with Scott Dichotomy. Don't worry, I got an autonomous vehicle, and on top of that, I'm watching the road. So, anyway. So basically, for the last 10 years or so, I've essentially just been going up and down from homeless to having money, whether it's driving to Uber 50 hours a week, making 40 grand in a year, then back to homeless, and then Sandra dying, being back to homeless, and get a nice, like, it's just been constant up and down, and just trying to find a piece of land somewhere, just somewhere, anywhere, that I can park a 40-foot school bus. That's literally all I need in life. That's all that's missing in my whole life plan. I've spent $10,000, $20,000 a year on rent for like 10 years when I had my whole life plan figured out in my early 20s, and I just haven't been able to make it happen. I had tons of money saved up. I put in all the work, had a perfect credit score, and just ended up getting screwed by multiple shitty people with deals and with crappy life situations, or with relationships draining me of all my life savings on numerous occasions. Like, that's how the last decade or so of my life has gone. How about you? Just like, I feel like I'm not asking too much. Like, I just need a piece of land, just somewhere big enough to park a school bus in this car. It's just a little 4-door sedan, or it's a good size sedan, but it's a sedan. It's an Accord, and I have a 40-foot school bus. All I need is a spot to park both of those things that I can live off the grid. I will literally hand someone thousands of dollars to just let me park my school bus and my Honda Accord somewhere in the woods, basically, that I can just live off the grid. I got solar panels, I got a wood stove. If I had that, I could stop having to relentlessly pursue paying rent and taxes, and I mean, I guess I'll always have to pay taxes. I just don't want to. But rent, I could definitely cut rent out. And like, that's literally been, depending on where I'm living, $10,000 to like $25,000 a year, depending on the area. And I could save all those expenses, and I don't want to be blowing $100,000 like every 4 or 5 years at that rate. Basically, that's crazy. And I don't need much. All I need is just a place to just pursue my art and music. And I will work my ass off. Like, that's just naturally how I am. Anytime recently that I try and give myself an off day, like, all right, I'm just gonna take today off. I'm just gonna rest, not do anything. I've been doing so much work and getting so much done. And basically what I end up doing is I'll chill for like a half hour, and then literally every single time I just get up and I start going off and doing like a million different things. Like, I naturally want to work. I want to produce tons of content and art and music, and I'm fine providing it for free as long as my needs are taken care of. So that'll be much easier to do once I have somewhere to call my own. Oh my god, guys. I don't know if you can really see the view. I'm gonna have to come back over here and get some drone shots eventually, but good lord. So if you happen to know anyone that has some land, or be willing to like sell a little tiny piece of land, like literally all I need is somewhere big enough just to fit my school bus and my car, like probably like 500 square feet or something. Access to the internet would be helpful, but it's not necessary, and that's something obviously I'd cover myself. Like in that school bus, I'm set up. I've lived in that school bus for years on end. Oh, as we drive by, oh, the barn's for sale. Structure only. Not the property? That's weird. It's a falling apart barn. Anyway. That would literally, if I had a place to call my own, just to park my vehicles basically, I would be set for life. And I would be able to provide endless content. Even if civilization collapses and like we don't have access to electricity anymore, I will still have electricity, and I will still be able to play metal shows and rock shows and stuff because I got solar panels. So support me now, and I will support you in the end times by playing music for you when all the electricity is gone. No, but seriously, you can pretty much get access to like everything I do for free. These videos are available on YouTube and Patreon at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen 10 years from now? Just always check my website, scottdichotomy.com, for the current locations. But this is where it's at for now. Twitch, Fridays at 3 p.m. for live streams. And then I upload these videos, usually over the weekend. I also do photography, nature photography of the areas that I'm in, as well as selfies. And all that stuff you can access for free on various platforms. I'm focusing mostly on my website and Patreon. I'm going to be doing karaoke streams once a month or so. I can't do those ones publicly because they give me all kinds of copyright strikes and crap, so I tried doing them for free for years, but I guess that's going to be the one thing that you have to pay for access to my Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can have access to my approximately once a month private live streams that will consist of me doing karaoke, just singing over some of my favorite songs. Or maybe it'll be a Cooking with Scott Dichotomy segment. Or maybe Spooky Stories with Scott Dichotomy. If any of this is interesting to you, check out patreon.com/ScottDichotomy. You can check out everything I do at scottdichotomy.com. Let me know, as always, your thoughts. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just let me know in the comments below. catch you guys next week.